I'm so glad I'm talking to the VP of Finn. I want to hear the behind the scenes, I want the documentary.
I think what we did early is the stuff that everyone eventually did is what's like the easy stuff you can do. Summarize, reword, this sort of stuff that we could put in our inbox. So it's not like one big decision. There wasn't one big fork in the road. It was this continual challenging, are we thinking big enough here? This incremental, big swings incrementally added on adds up to a really huge swing. So Finn is our AI agent for customer support, and it's been in the wild since like June 2023. So over 2 years later, we finally shipped kind of what seemed like small UX improvements in the messenger. It was crazy bad UX. It was the wrong question to ask at the wrong time. We've got this graph we show anyone who will listen of look where this gone from like 25% when we launched. It's now, looking at today, it's now like 65%. So that's across all our paying customers, that average rate. And it's just this beautiful incremental improvement in the product's value that we're delivering. But I definitely feel like, hey, we're in a time of builders. You need to be more. Happy to be here. I'm Brian Donohue. I'm a VP of product at Intercom, focused on building Finn, our AI agent. I've been at Intercom 11 years, so been through the ups and downs, and then really the last 2.5 years has really gone progressively more and more all in on AI. So excited to be here, share what we've learned and experienced, and have a chat.
I've been listening to a lot of different companies that I've been following talk about the behind the scenes story of doubling down on AI. One of them is the browser company, Arc Browser, one of my favorite. I love Arc Browser. They're not going to support it in the long term. They've completely rebuilt another browser called Dia, which I love. And they take a lot of the great things from Arc, but they've built it, started over, built from the ground up with AI as the focal point of the design process. And the fact that they're like, yeah, we can't bolt this on to our existing product. And very famously, like your CPO just talked about, no, this is like a existential threat. We can't like iterate into AI. We can't just put a chat box into the, so we're just going to start over. Can you walk me through those conversations of when you saw the potential of AI and what did that look like from an architectural perspective, like a product thinking perspective, where you had to reinvent like your offering?
Yeah, so for us, it really was, so first of all, we had an ML group prior to ChatGPT's launch. We had folks who were already deep in, at the time, we're like, this doesn't feel like AI, this is ML, right? ML felt like the right word to use back then. And for example, like the summer prior to ChatGPT's launch, so was that summer of 2022, one of the guys went up and shared at a show and tell of like, hey, I'm trying to get summarization to work well. And he went long and in depth, and it was like, it just still doesn't work that well. And this was like the leap, and ChatGPT, Fergal, head of AI, is like, oh, wow. Because they had been working with the models, but that was still open to everyone's eyes as to the power of it, seeing it in that chat framing of like exposing the technology there. So summary, like the summer, we're like just doing something like summarizing a support conversation. Technology was not good enough. And literally that opened the door. It immediately was good enough there. And that's just like a small thing like summarization. So we kind of had, our now AI group folks were like, oh yeah, wait, this seems big. I think I think what we did early is the stuff that everyone eventually did is what's like the easy stuff you can do. Summarize, reword, this sort of stuff that we could put in our inbox. And it was like, we thought, hey, these are somewhat useful things. We're just going to learn fast and try to see if we can build product faster and really just get out of the gates fast. And so we did that like by January. But really what was interesting was Mario, one of the guys in Fergal's groups, was basically, he's like, I think I can control the hallucinations, which was the huge risk. And so from early on, once he got the sense, and essentially this was before it was called RAG. RAG was a system to build to kind of constrain, hey, only answer from within this set of content, open the door to like the first swing. So we just started like, what's value we can get and learn and build and ship, and to like, oh wait, this actually feels like the big prize we can go for. Like we had old school bots where there's a little bit of ML where you're trying to detect some parts of the conversation. You know, there's a little bit of smarts in there, but it's mostly deterministic stuff going on. To like throw all that away and restart with that system. I think one thing that's so we kind of, and then from there, just building out, and that's like, I won't go on through the longer story there. So two other thoughts that I'll pull out is I feel like it's almost every 3 months we've like stopped and assessed, are we going big enough? Are we going bold enough? And it's been this, so it's not like one big decision. There wasn't one big fork in the road. It was this continual challenging, are we thinking big enough here? And I think that's really helped us get to the point now. So whether it's hiring, we got to swing more to, hey, this is going to take time. We got to build up our AI group with the folks with the right capabilities. And just this, it's in a way like this incremental, big swings incrementally added on adds up to a really huge swing. But it wasn't like there was one point, this is the huge swing, here it goes, if that makes sense. And so I think that's one thing looking back over the 2.5 years, just like continually challenging ourselves. Are we thinking big enough and broad enough? And you guys, are we too gung-ho on the opportunity? Is this gonna, are we too far ahead, trying to get that timing right? And then obviously all the product strategy, which part of it in. But I do think that's one part of it. A continual reassessment is part one. Part two, another thing on like this, the ripping up but I'm also a big fan of the browser. I haven't tried the new one, by the way, so I'm looking forward to try that, see how that goes. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is even though, so we built up our core techers literally from scratch around the LLM, and we still had inherited product, and you almost are blind to it. So Finn is our AI agent for customer support, and it's been in the wild since like June 2023. So over 2 years later, we finally shipped kind of what seemed like small UX improvements in the messenger. And what these were, to not even realize you have it. So in our Finn product, where we put all this effort, but the UX that we did initially was button-based. And so Finn would give an answer, and this was in the early stage of where people willing to believe and trust this, and we list out the sources earlier on, and then we say, did Finn answer the question? Then you'd have 2 buttons that would be like, no, or talk to the team. And this is anchored into our whole system because it's hard res, this is how we calculate resolutions, this is how we charge, like it's a fundamental UX of part of the system. And it was crazy bad UX. It was the wrong question to ask at the wrong time. The way we framed the question, did this answer your question, no or talk to the team, or sorry, yes or talk to the team? You couldn't say no and continue it. It was like, no one would ever ask this. It was inherited product we were blind to, and we've only just shipped improvements to actually make it more natural conversation, to more naturally encourage people to talk more to the bot. So it was like a good example of, oh, we built Finn from scratch, but no, we didn't. We still had parts of the system we were anchoring on. And 2 years later, we only realized, oh my God, I can't believe we've still inherited that design and hadn't challenged it. And it's because it's slow, it's deep in the process, the system, and so everyone's reluctant to change it. And then we wanted to change it because it felt like crappy UX. And then the huge upside, and we wanted to change it and make sure it didn't degrade performance. And it turned out it actually significantly helped resolution because customers were now engaging in a more of back and forth with Finn. So we almost feel like we were competing with one hand tied behind our back with this UX that we just got out the door fast. You got to move fast, get stuff out the door, and then you forget what to go back and reassess of like, oh yeah, we didn't think about that. So anyway, that's an example where we didn't even realize we had some inherited product.
I'm so glad I'm talking to the VP of Finn rather than the CPO because he's a fantastic storyteller. And it's a lot more buttoned up and polished, and I think for good reason. But I want to hear the behind the scenes, like I want the documentary. I don't want the blockbuster. And this is fantastic because, yeah, it really just comes down to the UX, but like human computer interaction paradigms are completely shifting, and it's not turn-based IVR decision-making trees where you have to do all this thought and decision-making of like, oh, well, what happens when this happens? Okay, now do this. My first question is, what happened to the ML team? Do they just get absorbed into the AI team? Is ML still a function at Intercom, or
that's all absorbed within the AI group. So we call that the AI group. So yeah, massively expanded. The ML folks are all rebranded.
Yeah. Do you still have features where it uses more traditional ML, or is the push to be like, the reason we use traditional ML is because we didn't have the technology we have today, and it's like, why would we not?
We only used ML because of that, but in our recent insights product that we shipped, one of this was topic categorizations. You got all your support conversations, and the thing we've tried to build 5 years ago, and it was just fine. There's improved technology to automatically detect your categories, your topics, and your subtopics. It's really the granularity and accuracy of this where the value is. A lot of that was actually ML techers not using LLMs. So we kind of used LLMs on top of the core ML techers. So, and I can't actually speak to the detail of what's advanced from 5 years ago on that side to it. And then we use the LLM on top of that to actually decide on some of the categories, name the categories, summarize the categories, make those human usable almost from the core ML side. So yeah, that's like one example where you'd expect LLMs did that work, but we actually relied on ML technology.
In maybe using AI LLMs as an interface to the traditional ML models,
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
but
That's like, I think, the exception, to be clear, but hey, that still happens.
with Sonnet, it's getting really good at
Yeah.
reasoning, and it's impressive. I got an invite to the Comet browser. My longtime college friend is there as a designer, and he gave me an invite, and I've been using it, playing around with its in-browser agentic flows, and it's getting really good. And just reading the reasoning, like stream of consciousness from Claude is the model that they're obviously using. It's getting fantastic. I think you're a really good case study of being at a company for so long, and then this massive reinvention of the concept of how you interact with Intercom's products, coming up with a new interface and a new interaction design style to interface with these new technologies. Like, what lessons did you have to unlearn coming from a more, I'll say, button-based transition into a very like leading agentic product?
There's kind of like multiple levels of it. If we look on how you work, we were really quite deliberately ripped up our decade of what we've learned from building. We basically said our principles hold true, but everything after that is like, we have no more strong opinions on these. So to folks, it was kind of like almost carte blanche for how to work. Even like our 6-week cycle, the thing I thought would be like, I don't think this is ever going away. This just feels like the sweet spot. And I remember way back when independently Basecamp said they use this 6-week thing. We both independently came to this is just the sweet spot. And they're like, we've thrown even that out the window. The way we work it's not that AI, working for AI mandated that. It was just in the spirit of trying to deliberately throw out. It's hard to know which preconceived notions are right or wrong. So throw most of them out and then rebuild them up as we're going. We threw out how teams were structured, where all the assumptions are off. You don't have your triad necessarily. You don't have build things through teams. So like our operating model for R&D, that we had this mantra of just like follow the work. What's the work we want to do? Organize ourselves around the work. And this was all optimizing for speed and focusing on the most important thing. So that's like in the how we work. And then like in terms of what you build, I think there's multiple things. One is something that the AI group has pushed. Like we still have, I'll just call it core R&D in the AI group, and we kind of merge together across work streams there. One of the things folks in the AI group, many of whom came from the core R&D, but have pushed on is like the trying to up-level the rigor of validating the product you're building, almost bringing in like a consumer A/B testing mindset that you never brought into SaaS type thing. Particularly, we're super proud of like our resolution rate, Finn's resolution rate. We've got this graph we show anyone who will listen of look where this gone from like 25% when we launched. It's now, looking at today, it's now at like 65%. So that's across all our paying customers, that average rate. And it's just this beautiful incremental improvement in the product's value that we're delivering. And in order to get that is the result of like hundreds of A/B testing and being really disciplined about ensuring what you're shipping isn't degrading that. With those UX improvements that we just wanted to make sure they didn't make things worse because we felt the UX was better, which was harder to measure, and then it turned out they did. So I think that's been one shift that we're still undergoing, is the whole rigor of the testing methodology and like, hey, back testing and how we're going through. That's like step one. And then if you can do it with A/B testing, which depends on what you're building, you still can't do that with everything, because if it's something that's going right to the end user, you have scale, you can do it. I think there's a rigor as you'd expect from, the people call themselves AI scientists and researchers, there's a real rigor to most of these. A lot of these folks are basically academics, or actually academic folks who are optimized towards building products. Optimized in their heads are like, I can't stand academics, way too slow. I need to build product, right? But they're coming from that background. So I think that's a huge part, is like the rigor, and we're still trying to, that's a work in progress.
Yeah. So from like the outside looking in, we're seeing designers posting PRs like at Intercom. I'm gonna focus in on, okay, you threw it up. We're not necessarily structured in traditional ways like with the triad anymore. How do you like that also just means like the portfolio management aspect of being a VP of product, where usually you have, okay, I got my scrums. I like the squad kind of sounds like the button based UX, like where it's okay, it's a button based squad team topology of like very well scoped experiences that you could divide and conquer as a team. Now that you're not doing that, what does the management of the product portfolio and the teams work? Because I know that a lot of PMs I would know would be like destabilized by the fact that they can't a clear ownership for designers. Like, how do you do that?
It is destabilizing. Like
Yeah.
there's a real cost to this, and the cost is like, we know how we operate. You know how you get things done. Everyone has a sense of, I broadly know what I'm gonna be working on the next 3 months. I know what kind of comes next. We build our own roadmap. That sort of stability of, I know what my job is and how I do it and how I'm gonna go about doing it. We did remove a big chunk of that, and there's a big cost to that. So now the upside to it is, we basically said, here's our priority work streams. Assemble the people you need for that work stream. Maybe you need 5 designers, maybe you need none. Maybe 3 would be the max.
And you're
Maybe you
talking
need
to like, you're talking to the product lead or the PM in this case?
well, this is like for R&D across AI group and core
Okay.
R&D. We've got 8 main work streams. This is the most important work to get done. We need to staff this work. Let's staff it according to what each project needs. One project might not need anyone from the AI group. One might need to be half from the AI group, depending on that. None of this maps cleanly to teams. And so we optimize for the most important work to get done. Just went all the way up to Owen, to our CEO, to say, are you aligned to this centralized roadmap list? Follow that work. And then the group remits were kind of to the continued on if they still had capacity, which they wouldn't know how long they would have it for. So it's really destabilizing. It's hard for folks. And so if you're on a work stream on there, then you kind of know what your focus is, and you get this huge upside of focus for people on the work stream. You don't have to sweat the other stuff here. Just focus on this, building the best product the fastest you can. But there's a lot of destabilizing forces outside of it that is hard for folks. It's hard for everyone. So there's a real cost to this. And I definitely don't think we've figured it out. We haven't figured out what the new operating model is, but we just evaluated and we're like, this seems to work. It's sufficiently good. We only fix things that clearly need to be fixed so you can just focus on what matters. That kind of ruthless focus, what I described to you, doesn't really make coherent sense, and I can't really articulate how it all works, but that's all right. If everything is generally not, that's good enough to make sure the most important work is getting done. That's been the spirit of how we've worked in the last 8 or 9 months, and it's been effective, but it has costs. We'll have to keep reevaluating, keep readjusting, but yeah, it is a big shift. It's a big shift for folks.
I'll tie that into the other like item that you brought up, which is it's increased rigor. It's also just the irony of like the democratization of software is the fact that you have to be more technical to take advantage of this democratization. If like the terminal is like natural language and you just need to talk to it, you need to know how to articulate how to transform data, how to navigate the code and everything like that. But your operating model just sounds like more human. Like, why did we have agile in the first place? One, software is really expensive to produce. So, like, you need to have these rituals in place to protect your expensive engineering resources. And then the whole point of the product operating model, I mean, like Marty Kagan and stuff, is the fact that there's a lot of coordination and project management. Most of the project management software is built around a full-time job of work or documenting everything. What I've been noticing in my personal practice is that it's not that hard to make glue documentation like DASIs, like decision-making documents, summaries of meetings anymore. If anything, it's increased the standard of like rigor of thinking. And if you're being very rigorous in your thinking, you're going to be questioning the team topology like every 2 weeks because you're just like, do we even need to have a dedicated team for this? It just doesn't seem like it justifies consuming this many resources. We could retask things. I've done a similar model like this in my current gig where it's like centralized roadmap. We have to like basically pitch every time, like for engineering resources every time. Pre-AI, it was super painful because you have to do all these traditional project management documentation things. But in the world of AI, where it's not that hard to have the meeting transcript, create a summary of the meeting, post it in the wiki for future prosperity, you can move on with your day and start making like better decisions. And like it was so hard that it was like the centralized model's not working. We got to figure out how to get back into product teams, trios, and clear ownership. But now hearing this, it's like, oh, but the technology moves so fast that all those constraints that the whole trio model was built around to solve, the complete problem brief has changed on project management and doing product work. And I'm now kind of being like, maybe we're onto something. It's just the technology wasn't there to stay on top of the work enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're drawing a direct line between AI enabling this, and I have in my head it's kind of like a dotted line, but it's harder to like fully justify the changes we've made. It's almost like the macro industry trends rather than literally AI is enabling this. I just feel like, we're at this, we're at the start of this S curve, not right at the start, but just on like day 3 of it, or actually in year 3 of it really. And it's the time of builders. And it's that so I think the irony is it's like this AI brings a democratization of technology, but requires at least for those of us building it, an up-leveling of our technical skills. So I think for PMs, that's definitely one of the things is like, you need to be more technical now to understand the product. You didn't really need to know the actual mechanics of how it was delivering the product you were trying to build. With AI, that's not the case. You need to understand how this is working, the architecture of the system, what the constraints are, what the risks are, and with the huge unknown of but will it actually be good? The whole uncertainty is, it all sounds good, but will it actually be good? And how are we going to actually validate that? Good in terms of because you don't know what the output will be or how valuable it will be to your customer. So like there's the uncertainty that it brings is like there's a technology uplift that's required. And you're talking about, if English is the coding language or natural language is the coding language, which seems like therefore everything's within reach, right? And people can make marketing websites and do it without any technology. So for sure part of that is true. But then the flip side is also like what we found in building tasks, basically like the most agentic part of this. How do you get an agent to do a refund process? Those sort of things that are always deceptively complex. The hurdle is not a technical one. You need to be able to plug into data. So there's literally some technical hurdle that you might actually require code to get to, that small part there. And then as you're saying, maybe to transform the data. The working with data part is the most technical part. But the other part is there's not a barrier of code, but there's a barrier of working with technology and a barrier of thinking logically and extracting rule sets and testing rule sets and iterating this. And who's naturally good at this is, engineers. This is what engineers do. This is how they think already. So this has been the lesson for us, and like it's natural language. And then you can pull WYSIWYG stuff, but it's still not easy to do. Or it's harder to do. Effectively prompt engineering is really what we're talking about there. So I think there's like one of the ironies that I've kind of grappled my head around is, God, it seems like it should be available to all, but it's still not. But the barrier is almost a manner of thinking, an approach of thinking. I remember we were talking about like this small thing of like in our insights product and just how we framed, like summarized why a conversation got a certain CX score. And we're just like, hey, how should we say bot? Or wait, what if it is an old school bot? Or there's just boring product shit if you're just trying to be consistent and use your language correctly. And it was a engineer and me, and I think a PM talking through details of it. Oh, wait, what should we do here? And then you have the chat, and then you see the engineer comes out of it. It's like, okay, wait, before we go, so to be clear. And he basically articulated, rule 1, when this happens, then we're going to do this. Rule 2, when this, I was like, oh, this is how engineers work. They're like, I need You can't leave it up to the program to do it. You still have to program. Exactly. You
Yeah.
just don't use the programming language of before. That's exactly the right thing. You still have to program to get this to work.
Yeah, so if you don't know how to say in natural language how like the math should work and like some business logic, then you're leaving it up to the LLM, which is leaving up to chance, which is increasing risk and the output being bad. I think like one way that I've discussed it with other guests on the podcast was second language, like language learning. So like I speak Spanish, right? And one of my favorite things to do is go to Spain or Mexico, cover this blonde mop like that I have with a ball cap. My beard is a lot darker than my hair. It's weird. It looks like I bleach my hair sometimes, but I always try to opt for a Spanish speaking country because it's just so fun to travel there because you know how to interface with natural language, with articulate ideas and say jokes, and you understand like the dichos. How do you say that? Idios, idio. Yeah, there's sayings like there's like
Idioms.
idioms, exactly. Like you understand the idioms of the language, so like you're able to connect better. You actually understand like the emotional resonance, like tone, timbre, volume, and there's a reason why like in sales, it's a lot of the training has to do with like how you use your voice, like it's an instrument, and like that you still have to. And that's the reason why some people are more persuasive than others. That's like an engineer is going to be way more persuasive programming in natural language than a non-technical PM. And I totally resonate with that. And you know how to ask for what you want because your company's not paying you to leave it up to chance from ChatGPT. Like you're master of the content. You're just having it organize it in a way that like makes sense.
Yeah, if you're building product for other people to use, you need to reduce the risk of chance. Whereas if you're just building it for yourself, you could wait till you get what you want. But you can't do that when you're building product. So yeah, exactly. I think that's been really interesting learning that side to it. But I definitely feel like, hey, we're in a time of builders. You need to be more technical. Like I've had several chats about that now. I don't know exactly what it means yet, but it's surely a thing. And it's the same as like, hey, now, because there's for designers shipping code, that's an idea that's been around for a while, right? But now it's now easier to do it, but really is within reach. And obviously there's a bunch of things that now are within reach that previously weren't. So what was your phrase? I can't remember the phrase you used earlier.
You have to understand the idioms.
You had a nice phrase there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, just to add on that, like it's really clicking for me because like designers have always been thinking in like CSS and like HTML. It's just never been efficient. I come from a design background. I learned how to do React, and I learned enough to know I'm never going to be able to spend enough time on this to get good at it and fast enough. Since I'd rather get really good at the designs, but like that transition makes a lot more sense. The one that where I'm like a little skeptical is PMs doing design because it's okay. You don't know like you don't have any vocabulary around type or composition or like hierarchy and stuff like that. So that you don't know what to ask for. And so whatever the output is, you don't know if it's good or not, but you're hoping that it is. And that would mean that like PMs would have to level up like their design vocabulary as well. Oh, increase the padding by this much or something like that.
I do think the often used phrase of product taste has come to the forefront in the age of AI. But I do believe PMs, we used to come from a place where all the PMs we hired kind of had a design background. I had an X background, if you want to count that.
I mean, your CPO is a UX guy.
Yeah, and Des and Owen. So we're unusual having a design heavy exec team. I do think PMs should have a good taste for like decent UX, but also agree with you. So I think the delta in my head of PMs doing design is actually, it's really all about prototyping. And it's like designing, building to think to build, build to think. You write to think, and then you need to build to think and basically prototype to think. So I think that's the part that's valuable for PMs to mess around with an idea and not have to wait for someone else to build a Figma prototype or something like that, or go through it and just get the idea out there to mess around with it. And it's basically like speeding up the conversation, speeding up the getting to confidence or not. Is this a good idea? Or is this worth doing? Rather than the PM actually goes all the way to like, hey, here's like the final design, which to me is like, yeah, oh yeah, that definitely doesn't. Well, maybe there's a world where it's like small changes that you're making. You can use your design system in the same way an engineer could do. I'm sure that's coherent. But yeah, no, broadly with you, it's not PMs doing design, but PMs, I really feel like it's that build to think part, the prototyping.
Well, But yeah, it's like an intellectual wireframe or like a literal wireframe, but it's so cheap to like make a tangible thing with interactive elements that
Yeah.
you could share it internally or whip it up in front of a customer. And then the designers just cool. Like we validated this is an actual problem. The customer's eyes lit up when we showed this like PM prototype. Like, okay, where can we take this next? Really
Yeah.
like make it ready for production. And I would definitely encourage that to like any PMs. But I think it's like the PMs being like, okay, how do I hook up Superbase and stuff like that? And I could just bypass the designer. I don't know. It's like me saying I could bypass a back end engineer. I don't have the vocabulary
Yeah.
to like program business logic.
Like
Yeah.
we're all still so new for everyone figuring out what's the
Yeah.
opportunity, and we don't know what makes us, what speeds us up and what slows us down. And that's part of what's hard with this is, am I
Yeah,
going to
definitely.
waste 2 hours trying to do something here? There's no default best practice for anything at the moment. We're operating in a wild west. The macro industry landscape and the micro how you work, which is fun and exciting, but also like, gee, it's,
Hard
it's
being a
just
people
unnerving.
manager
Yeah.
because people are like, what's my job? And you're like, well, just use your judgment. And it's like, what? I don't know. Like what I'm focusing on. And that really like sifts out what kind of talent you need for very bleeding edge technology is self-managing, a little bit of entrepreneurialism. Like those people are going to do very well, which historically they really haven't in traditional big tech company scenarios. The people that are entrepreneurial don't like being put in a box. Like me, it's been very exciting because like everyone's so destabilized that no one's going to like hold me to a standard where I'm just like, hey, I'm just going to prototype it.
Yeah.
I know I'm a PM, but I have a design background. Like I know I could take this to like a pretty decent, like valid, like concept. And I don't know, it's fun. Scary for a lot of people. Fun for me so far. Now, like that's like how to work. How to price is like another thing I'm very interested in. One thing we talked about before the interview is like usage-based pricing, results-based pricing, traditional SaaS pricing, and like how destabilizing that is. So, like, how do we monetize this idea? Like, how do we go to market?
I think we're pretty early with the whole outcome-based pricing. Outcome-based pricing means we charge, rather than charging based on usage, which maps to like RLM costs, and then, we put a cost on top for the software that we're building, and that's usage-based pricing every time, every question that Finn answers, for example. Instead, we only charge when Finn answers a question, resolves it, and it doesn't need to go to your team. So that's outcome-based pricing. So we charge per resolution. There's a huge amount of uncertainty when we initially took the swing because you don't know. It depends on how successful, there's just a huge amount of variability in it. Dara, our CTO, actually, I think ultimately made the call on it of like, no, we really believe this is the future and we want to try it because it's pricing aligned to value. And, Intercoms has a pretty bumpy history with pricing. We've got a lot of things wrong with pricing. And we finally gotten pricing right prior to this with just our regular help desk. And then this was trying to go in that vein of what do we think the right pricing is? So anyway, one thing that's been interesting is when you have outcome-based pricing, the most beautiful things, and this was very deliberate, but is like the incentives are aligned. So what your customers want out of the product is what your product team wants out of the product is what your finance team wants out of the product, right? Everyone is happy when resolutions go up. This is very unusual in SaaS products. Say if it's like seats-based pricing where people adding more seats doesn't necessarily mean much, right? Well, it doesn't mean they're happier as customers. It doesn't mean they're getting any better outcome. The seats base means, okay, your finance team is happier, your sales team is happier because they're paying more money. But that doesn't mean they're getting more value out of the product or they're happier there. So the product people or the customer are not. So outcome-based pricing takes the circles and like puts concentric circles over these three. So and one of the unexpected side, so that was quite deliberate to like align incentives. But what was unexpected was like your metrics suddenly, the whole thing about outcome metrics, which has always been this long, hard slog of like, what are the right outcome metrics? Do you really optimize around it? And there's still it's always a proxy. You're measuring a proxy and is this the right thing? And suddenly so much of that conversation, like we had built a custom maturity framework of trying to identify what are the attributes in the product? How much do they need to use of these parts? And if you use, 3 of these 5 parts sufficiently well, then you're a mature customer. And that's our success metric for trying to get this % of our customers to maturity based on all these product usage proxies, which we think equate to them getting value, which we hope equate to them, doesn't even necessarily equate to them being satisfied with the product. Whereas so much of that washes away with outcome-based pricing and where you've just got, like for us, the customer, to a health check of the customer is, what is their involvement rate, which is how many of their inbound conversations are they letting Fin try to answer? What is Fin's resolution rate? And then what is the CX score? What's the quality of it? What's the performance of it? And are they applying it broadly? It's like, so with 3 metrics, which are the 3 metrics we show to our customers on their performance page. And one of those metrics is how we make money. So like you've just got phenomenal alignment of incentives that really simplifies a lot of product. Now you still have proxies. Do we know if what we built helped actually move the resolution rate? So it's not like all the complexity goes away, but just from that core alignment of those 3 things, the customer, the business, and the product, that's been a wonderful thing that we've gotten from outcome-based pricing that we never had before.
Yeah, and outcome-based pricing is not necessarily like a new concept. It's just really hard to do with SaaS because like how do you prove it?
Yeah.
Right. It reminds me of a tire company where they put pricing based off miles, right? It's just like how many miles these tires, that's what you pay for.
Yeah.
And that like increased conversions very highly because it's like, cool, like this will get you this many miles if you pay this much, right? If you buy a more expensive tire, it gets you more miles. And outbound sales companies, it's like, hey, you only pay when we like get you a lead or something like that. So are you saying that like they pay $0? It's only when like Fin succeeds. There's no like base cost to help maintain the server.
So if you get a resolution, it's 99
Wow.
cents. If you get 1,000 of them, it's $1,000, $999. So it is literally that straightforward. Here's like how we priced before. Resolution bot was our old Techers, bot-based deterministic stuff with some ML in there. And we charged based on seats. And so what's the result is that we had a lot of customers paying a lot of money who had not properly set it up and were getting like no value. It was built in the contract and then they were done and they didn't go back to it. The payment was divorced from the outcome. And we had other customers who had put huge effort in and like were getting way more return on it. Like they were paying not nearly enough. So we had like both ends of the spectrum of people who were paying for product they weren't using and getting no value, and customers who we were not monetized anywhere near the value they were getting out of it. It's just so the seat-based approach, which is, standard SaaS, it just like was not fit for purpose. But I don't think I can't remember the pricing at the time, how much we consider it. To your point, outcome-based pricing isn't brand new, but it's just, anyway, it's been a huge unlock just in that building product and knowing that your customers are getting value. If a customer's got a 90% involvement rate, a 60% resolution rate, and their CX score is in the 80%, you're like, I'm pretty sure they're going to be happy with Fin, because that's amazing value they're getting out of that. So that's been wonderful.
Another thing that we talked about before the interview, this is a really great segue. It's not a new concept to have outcome-based pricing, but usually those companies have 4 deployed engineers to stack the deck in their favor. That means like custom development, service-based businesses where it's like, hey, I need to like make sure that this is implemented and integrated into the client's system, basically guarantee that we hit those outcome numbers. Because if we just say, okay, cool, just open up the web app, upload your customer data, link all your phone chats into Fin, and then cross your fingers, like Fin's going to resolve things. Like that's highly dependent on like the customer, how proactive they are to feed the right data into Fin. That impacts resolution rate. What has, I guess, the implementation process looked like?
Yeah, so we have leaned in the whole concept of this forward deployed engineer, which I think came from Palantir, or maybe they just publicized it going back years, which felt like to us a different operating model. We just call it R&D services. It's kind of like also the pro serve, right? But this is R&D folks leaning heavily into this. And we have found that this is really important. And it's exactly for what you said. And I think the delta here is it's way easier to realize when people aren't getting value and it's like, hey, they need help here. Whereas previously that would have been more opaque. And so you could have had someone coming in and it would be harder to detect that they're not close to getting that value. Whereas here, it's just wait, if someone's at a 5% involvement rate and a 30% resolution rate, well, something's going wrong here. So we got way more visibility of this going wrong, and then people are making the wrong conclusion. Oh, this isn't actually that great of a product. And it's like, no, there's huge value. You just need more help at getting the setup right, getting your content right. Usually a lot of it is in the content, but sometimes it was how they had set up and configured, and they didn't quite realize that they had not given Finn enough of a chance to answer. There's a bunch of reasons, and a lot of it is also internal changes they need to go through. The R&D services has been a critical new muscle for us to build. It seems like I've seen this with multiple different AI companies. It's almost to that, God, this is ironic. You would have expected, if you had asked me 2 years ago to predict what would happen, I would say, oh yeah, PLG, this is going to be, AI will just reinforce the power of PLG and that will be amplified. And that is not what's happened. AI products, at least now, maybe this will just come in a couple of years. Maybe in 5 years this will change. But right now, I think most AI first products generally have a good bit of handholding at the outset. And it's both like success using the product. There's also usually transformation behind the scenes. Like transformation is such a terrible word to use, right? It's like, oh my God. It's like a digital transformation, the worst phrase ever. It's like someone's paying consultants, God knows how much money for some god awful project. Oh my God, get away from the word. But unfortunately, it's like AI transformation, I think is the right word. As painful it is to say. But it's like a big shift for companies and they need support on that side of it as well. So yeah, that concept, and it's like, and you're like, hey, do we need PMs for this? Do you need PMs? And it's like, turns out PMs are good at this and they need engineers as well, but it's just like it naturally maps well. So
Yeah.
we're like, maybe it'll just for the first 3 months, but it's like, no, this seems pretty durable, that PMs. And I think a bunch of other people have come to the same conclusion, that whole space. And it's also a space that's very fun for PMs to work because you're so close with the customer. And one other thing that related to this that I feel like has changed, you realize when we're building product, and particularly when your product's bigger and broader, and so you're always focused on a small part. So if outside of the first startup land where you've got the whole view, but everyone building has necessarily has blinkers on for the product area, which is probably quite narrow that they're focused in on, right? And they're like, I just want to build this. And when I talk to customers all the time, but I'm really like ignoring everything except for this.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of this. And when you do R&D services, you have like, there's no blinkers. You're like, I got to get you to success. And I have the whole gamut of their experience, what they care about, what matters. And you feel the pain of your own product in a way that never happens otherwise. This is when everyone's gone and done services like, oh God, that part, I can't believe, like they feel the pain of the product in a way that you don't do when you're in your standard product building. So I think like it's just like cast this huge light on your product that it's so hard to see when you're in a necessarily siloed thinking of I'm trying to build a feature, improve something X. So it's been almost like a slap in the face for kind of exposing how narrow you can be building product.
Yeah, and then that blows up the whole like product trio thinking, because then it's, oh, who talks to customers, which segments, and then that customer interview is totally wasted because it's through the lens of my feature.
Exactly.
Even though the customer has said several things that is holistic across the whole thesis of what the business is and how we're servicing them. So it's cool. I'm going to come up with these specific problem features to solve 5% of this problem, when so many things have to orchestrate together to even succeed in the first place.
Yeah.
Very excited. So essentially you're just like, okay, yeah, we still have PMs. It's just letting them loose, like on a broader scope. And
so we have folks who are clearly working there. We
like
need
4
to
deployed
get
engineers.
effectively. Yeah. So we have a group and that's their focus and job. And then we move some people in and out. So it's not fully fluid, but
well, that's an important detail, right? Because the solution can't be like a custom solution. That's like the downside of 4 deployed engineers historically, is that it's almost too custom and then it makes a Franken product. And so like the product thinking that's go into it is, okay, how can we take this custom implementation and then learn from it and then upgrade the product to scale this onboarding workflow, right? Repeatable stuff with
but I think another thing it's challenged is like the in product, it's like the human tendency with everything is to slow down and add more bureaucracy, right? So the product that is like, oh, we'll take that feedback on and then we'll aggregate it up and then we'll figure out some genius way of coming up with our idea of what the right priorities based on all the feedback that we're hearing is. Like that process is slow, and ironically you end up removing judgment and just trying to weight up, hey, here's all the signals, and put some sort of, hey, just how many times was asked, what's the value of those customers, or what's the blah, blah, blah. And pushing more to like the services thing does also unlock of like, hey, does it make sense what they're asking for? Just build that thing. And then we'll figure out how to productize it. We actually haven't built too much of just stuff behind feature flags, but we've tried to come, I think does what the customer asks for make sense? Is it small? Just build it in. Don't sweat it. Just do it. Like adapt faster, like trying to get a big R&D org to act more like a startup who just wouldn't sweat these things. And this makes sense what the customer is asking for. So just build it, and then there's bigger ones that you do have to sweat and you got to think about and like, whoa, okay, that does require more deliberation. But I think R&D teams have almost like hindered themselves of not just like making quick, fast, small product decisions based on one customer or a couple customers heard it. It's like, couple customers heard of what they're saying makes sense. Okay, let's just go build this small thing. Let's add this small thing. Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, but a lot of product teams have frameworked themselves into a corner where they can't do anything unless they go through the steps in the framework. And sometimes things just make sense. The thing that the sales guy said, we need to close this deal, makes sense. We shouldn't say no to sales every time they come up with a good idea. Yeah. Or even if it's a bad idea, dig down deeper. Oh, okay, why are you asking that? And then it ends up being a good idea. Is there anything that you feel like, Brian, that hasn't been said that shouldn't be said? We covered a lot of material, but do you feel like there's any like loose threads that you want to close before you sign off? And then
the world we're in now, like all the uncertainty, it's at all the levels, right? And it's like AI is this convergent force that just is knocking down our notions of how you build product, what R&D teams are, as well as what your product is in the first place, right? And so it's kind of this amazing, like, I don't know if juggernaut is the right word, but it's like this blob that just spreads in all directions and knocks down all your preconceived ideas. And that's even in strategy, your strategy idea. And AI just knocks walls down. It just knocks walls down. And so it's fun and it's exciting and it's uncertain. But I think that's rare to get to work in a time like that where so much how you build, so much of what we said is how you price, how you build product, what your product is, what your role is. So many things are up in the air. We all get to figure it out now and define it now. It's uncertain and it certainly causes anxiety for me figuring out what's my role, what am I doing here? But it also means we get to write the next rule set or the next best way of working. So that's like the massive upside here. All the winners are yet to be figured out. The next wave of here's how you build an AI, it's all to be played for. So it's fun times.
I've always been very jealous of people that were in the prime of their career during the internet because I'm like, man, it's so disruptive. Like there weren't any rules. Yeah. And now it's cool. Here's our app.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yes, I get my internet like macro trend that I get to cut my teeth in my career.
Yeah.
Brian, how can people reach you? And
God, it's weird. I'm on Twitter, but I don't write anything on Twitter anymore because almost nothing gets. I guess LinkedIn is where we actually share most of our stuff. It's weird to say that out loud, but it's actually true. So God knows what my LinkedIn handle is, but Brian Donohue at Intercom. You'll find it. And that's where we share. By the way, we actually share a lot more building. This is also what's fun. People share what they're building. We share way earlier. Engineers talking about stuff. So there's a lot more transparency as well across folks. So that's also fun. Just learning faster from everyone. So yeah.
Love it. Well, Brian, thank you for coming on the show. You have a good one.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Hey, listener. Thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.